You can now shoot full frame, open gate, RAW for a couple $1,000s. You can now buy a whole set of anamorphic lenses for a fraction of what one lens would have cost you 7 years ago. And the same goes for lenses of all different shapes, sizes, and types, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. As videographers, filmmakers, content creators, owner-operators of video production studios, we are so spoiled these days in the options, the accessibility, and the affordability of quality pieces of equipment. Even since I got into video right around 8 years ago, the level of quality and performance that you can get for the money has come down drastically. My name's Austin. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I help run a video production company based out of Omaha, Nebraska called Glory Visuals, and we specialize in commercial and corporate video production. And really over the last year, we've been investing more and more into quote unquote cine glass for a couple of reasons. Number one is it helps us be camera agnostic. As companies are constantly dropping new products and innovating and the next best camera is always right around the corner, we decided we want to invest in something that would help us to bridge the gap between camera systems so that we can be adaptable as a company, so that we can be able to jump onto the newest and latest and greatest thing and not be stuck with one specific camera system. Right now, for us, that's Sony. However, you can see here the Blackmagic Pyxis 6K that we just picked up, and having PL mount glass enabled us to even think about owning this camera. And so that's the thought process behind investing into some of this cinema glass. But today I really want to talk specifically on this set here in front of me. And these are the Dulens Apo Mini Primes. This is the original 4-lens set that they released when this lens set came out. This is the 31, 43, 58, and 85. We actually purchased this set specifically for a higher budget commercial that we were wanting a little bit more of a unique look. We could have filmed it on our Sony lenses or our Sigma lenses, but we just wanted something a little bit stylized and a little bit different. Honestly, with a lens set at this price point, it made more sense for us to purchase the set rather than rent the set. For the amount of days that we were shooting for this commercial, for the different days and schedules, it wasn't something where we could consolidate everything to one day. We would have had to rent these lenses for multiple weeks to be able to cover the whole commercial. And it would have been way more expensive to rent than just to buy a full set of these. So we ended up purchasing the set, and I'm super glad we did so far. They were an absolute joy to use on the commercial. And so I just wanted to talk about our experience with them and a few key reasons that we decided to invest in these lenses and why we are keeping them to be used on future projects. Currently on B&H, the set of these 4 lenses is $38.99, which is pretty incredible and really is on par with a lot of photo primes, maybe even a little bit cheaper than some of the higher end photo primes that you could get for the Sony E-mount system. Secondly is their PL mount. The benefits that come from the cine lens form factor, that true mechanical focus. For a long time, we're using Sigma, Sony, zooms, or primes, and nowadays almost zero stills lenses have true mechanical manual focus. And so we wanted something that had true mechanical manual focus, something that had focus gears that we could rig up with a wireless with our Nucleus M and pull focus remotely. And so we really wanted to invest in a set of cine glass, and it just made sense and worked out for this specific commercial. Have it eat a small portion of the budget that we set for the commercial, but be able to acquire a piece of gear that we can use for many, many more shoots and already have used them for several other shoots. So after using these on a real paid project, I have a couple thoughts, things that I really like about them, things that I don't like about them. And so first off, I'll get the things out of the way that I don't like. Typically on our channel, you probably won't see us bashing on products all that often because I do a ton of research into every product that we buy, into every purchase that we make, and very rarely is there a huge miss where there's something that I didn't already know was going to be a con and I didn't already think through that in our workflow. And so since these were pretty new to the market, there are a couple things that I haven't seen other people touch on that I think may be useful for you to know before you decide if you want to buy these or not. First of all, they are designed to have a vintage look. Described on their website, they have kind of a soft halation, a filmic vibe to them, whatever the heck that means. In my use case and in my experience, really what that means is, number one, they're pretty low contrast lenses. Typically, I find myself having to add back in a little bit of contrast to really get some punch. And that's okay. It's a specific type of lens for a specific use case. We were looking for something that kind of had that vintage vibe, but wasn't quite anamorphic. We were delivering for 16:9. And so we wanted that vintage aspect. So that's number one. Number two is the flares. If you watch any video on these lenses, they're gonna show the flares. You'll see some flares examples in this video as well, but the rainbow flares on these lenses are really unique and I think can make them appear to be far more expensive lenses. I have an acquaintance who just put together a commercial and he had some similar rainbow flaring, and I reached out to him and asked him what type of lens they use because I was curious if it was this lens. And it wasn't. It was a far more expensive, rehoused vintage lens that I had never heard of before. But it's interesting how in a sub $1,000 modern lens with beautiful modern manufacturing and machining, that you can achieve some of those results and get a look that punches beyond what the price point of these lenses are. So vintage look, rainbow flares. Now what I will say on the rainbow flares, and this leads me to my first con, in my set, the rainbow flares are really only there on the 43mm and the 58mm. To go a step further, the rainbow flares on the 43mm are far more intense in saturation than the flares on the 58. So one thing that I really would love if they are going to add a creative control type of thing like the rainbow flares, which, another side note, they're only present below like T2.6, fully visible at T2.4, and as you stop down to T2.8, they disappear completely from the source outward. So you can kind of dial in if you want it to be like a half moon or a full circle from the flaring source around the lens back to the flaring source. However, they're inconsistent across the focal lengths. They're really only there on these two focal lengths, and they're even different between these two focal lengths. So kind of interesting. I wish that it was more consistent across the range, at least the same amount of saturation and having them present on all four of the focal lengths. And the last thing that they make sure to specify when they're marketing these lenses is that they are all the exact same size and weight, which is really great if you're using this on a gimbal or a Steadicam. It's really great regardless because you're not changing the balance of your camera when you're switching lenses. These things are so lightweight, so compact, and they are a great experience to shoot with because they're not massive, bulky lenses. But somehow, even with as small and compact as they are, they have very little vignetting. They have very little focus breathing. They seem to cover a full frame sensor, no problem. Open gate, no problem. And so really for the size, for the weight, and for the cost, I feel like generally these punch far beyond their price point. The other thing I forgot to mention, these are all T2.4. So that's probably partly why they aren't so big, but still have solid performance. These are not T1.4, T1.2 lenses. For me, that's just fine. I very rarely shoot anything below T2.8 these days. And so I have not had an issue with these if I'm running them on the FX6 and I'm shooting an event or something where I absolutely need low light performance. I've got my high base ISO, but in a controlled environment, for me, I very rarely would ever want to go below T2.4. And what I can say is, although yes, that could be considered a con, these lenses seem to be very sharp, even wide open at T2.4. The last thing I want to touch on in terms of the specs that they advertise is that the APO design of these lenses is in an effort to minimize the chromatic aberration that you're getting. And I'm not gonna get into this massive scientific test. There are other videos out there for that. What I can say in my experience and using these lenses, I have not noticed any chromatic aberration. They seem to perform great. The other con I would say, which I don't know if it's necessarily a con, or if it's just the way these lenses are designed and should be expected and embraced for a vintage feeling lens, is that with the low contrast, it seems like they do flare extremely easily. Even pointed into a mild light source, you get a little bit of washed out image and it lowers the contrast even further. Not a big deal. These aren't probably like all-purpose lenses that you're using for every type of shoot. These are really meant specifically for when you're looking for that more soft halation, low contrast type of look. Another thing you could do, just run a matte box. I did have to use my hand like as a sun hood for a few shots in this commercial because the sun was hitting the element. I didn't have a matte box on the camera, and so the sun was just completely washing out the image and making it very, very low contrast. Using my hand, just blocking out the sun from hitting the lens from the side, looking directly into light sources, it seems to be fine, but it's kind of when it's hitting it from the side, it can kind of just wash out the image. The last thing I'll say about these lenses that could be a pro or a con, depending on your shooting style, is the focus throw. It's about 270 degrees, which for shooting handheld without a follow focus is a little lengthy. However, I've been able to make do without a follow focus just fine. It's really just if you're doing a infinity to close focus throw, it can be a little tough and you kind of gotta do one of these guys. But not a huge issue and is honestly probably a plus for a lot of people running a follow focus or wireless focus. Having that longer focus throw and having that more accurate focus ability is probably a pro for a lot of people. Another thing I really love about these lenses is the build quality. I don't have a whole lot of experience with really, really high-end cinema glass, but based on my personal experience using stills lenses and using some of the more budget cine glass, these feel extremely premium in the hand. The focus gears are extremely smooth, and the iris, while a little bit stiff, is very smooth. The finish on the lenses feels incredible. It feels durable. I love the design of the lens, the gold accent. They're beautiful lenses. While that doesn't really matter, Dulens in my book gets points for making a product that looks good and performs well for a solid price point. That's all I got for now for the Dulens Apo Mini Primes. I'll put some test footage right after this so you can take a look at some of the shots that we've gotten with these lenses. Definitely leave a comment below if you have any questions, feedback, product recommendations, you name it. Would love to interact and chat with you down in the comments. But until next time, cheers. Thanks for watching.